About Zen Mindfulness, Chapter 10, The Art of Mindful Communication. Our full presence is what we create when we practice mindfulness. We're truly there, in the moment with our bodies. When we're present, without resistance, we can begin to hold the space for other people who need it. Before we engage anyone in conversation, we need to come back to the moment. We need to cultivate our own presence. We need to let go of any ego thoughts that are sending us spiraling into the past or the future. How can we fully listen to someone when our mind is elsewhere? Do not underestimate the power of your presence. Even just sitting with someone without saying a word, with your full presence, you can reassure and calm another person. When sitting beside a huge oak tree, we can feel and be reassured by the presence of the tree. It doesn't have to do anything, but by it just being there, it can give a lot of comfort. We might know people who give us this presence, the presence of a mighty oak tree, firm and unyielding to whatever is happening. With mindful communication, you can practice this. We have to begin by using our discernment on whether someone wants to engage in conversation or not. It's no good starting a conversation when someone is distracted or in their ego. An example would be if someone is hungry, they will be thinking more about what they want to eat than listening to you, though they might pretend to be or think that they're listening. It's useful to think of people as open, closed, or in between. If someone is open, they're ready and willing to talk to you. If someone is closed, they're definitely not, as in the case of an angry person. Somewhere in between means things could go to open or closed, depending on what happens next, what you say, and where each person's thoughts go. With mindfulness, your discernment increases. You get to know straight away if something you said causes the other person to close down from the conversation. This is not cause for alarm or for ego thinking. Without judgment, we can change tact. So that piece of speech didn't work. Let's try something else. Can we offer a silent presence or words of understanding that might help the person open up again? At times it can be especially difficult to keep conversations going. You get stuck in conflict or misunderstanding. Sometimes it's best to leave conversing, have time out, and come back later. Mindful listening is the skill of paying attention to another without entering your ego mind. If someone is requiring to talk to you, that is a gift. Having gratitude for a conversation is wonderful. Someone is asking you something or wanting to confide in you. This is already a compliment to you. So whenever someone decides to talk to you, see if you can let go of your ego and tune in to listening. As always, your ego gives clues you've entered this state of being and have lost your listening to your thinking about the conversation. Here are some clues right here. Each clue, if you notice it, is a guide for you to drop your ego and come back to the practice of just listening. Always wanting to be right, justifying. If someone is explaining something and you believe they're wrong, or if they're challenging you on a certain topic, you'll feel threatened immediately and your ego comes into play. We'll start defending our position and we'll be at war with our words. Things like, no, let me explain, or it's definitely on channel 3, not channel 2, is this kind of response. Always wanting to talk about self. Someone might be telling you their story and it triggers something that happened to you, so you decide to let them know about your story. Oh yes, I know what you mean. When that happened to me, I did this. Interrupting conversations. A classic ego trait is not waiting for the other person to finish their sentence. They may have sparked something in you, and you're desperate to get your points in before you forget what you wanted to say. Maybe you're becoming impatient or bored with the conversation. All of these feelings and annoyances come with thinking in your ego mind. Notice when you interrupt people. It's good practice to try again next time to not, if you can. Non-presence. You might lose your awareness and drift into your thoughts. You might be distracting yourself by looking at the TV, picking up your phone, eating food, or mentally planning what to have for dinner. These are often subconscious habits and not deliberate ploys to stop listening. If you notice you're losing your concentration, then you've noticed, and you can come back to the listener. Stubbornness. Digging one's heels in, resolutely not budging from an opinion or judgment. Conversations end pretty quickly if someone refuses to see another side or has a grudge about them being right. Reluctance. Reluctance to even engage in a conversation is a trait of a wounded ego. Notice if someone asks to speak to you and your heart sinks. What preconceived notions do you have before you even start? Sometimes we're reluctant because we feel we're going to be told off, or found out, or something is a threat. Feeling heavy, strong emotions. If you're feeling something, you might struggle to stay fully present. Frustration, anger, annoyance, impatience, grief, guilt, etc. is thinking about the conversation, or possibly about something altogether unrelated, which has been triggered consciously or subconsciously. Stop, breathe, and see if you can let go of your thoughts and retune in to the listening. Offering advice when not required. Often when someone is talking to us, it's about an issue they're facing. Our ego is quick to placate or give a solution. Unless the person has specifically asked for an answer to their problem, the rule of thumb is to let it be. We're here to offer our presence and empathy, not become a saviour or show off our knowledge. There are times when it's perfectly acceptable to give a solution, but again it's up to your discernment and wisdom to know when it's the right time and not use this problem-solving mind as a habit. Your mindfulness will be able to notice when someone wants empathy or actually requires a fix. Helping the person to find their own solution is better than offering advice, even when they directly ask for it. Judgmental conversation. If you're gossiping, criticizing something or someone, complaining about this or that, then you're in your ego. You're not accepting of something, and all we do if we continue complaining about something is to send our judgments out into the world, and this can affect the other people we talk to as well. Often people habitually have conversations like this, complaining about the weather, their family, or their job. These unconscious patterns are being reinforced in each of the conversations, no matter how harmless the gossip sounds. Own need not being met. If we're hungry or thirsty or needing the toilet, we have physical needs that are not being met, and so we struggle to listen mindfully. If we have mental needs for rest, relaxation, or for being left alone, we'll be thinking of those things too. So you can see just with these ego traits how difficult it is to remain present with just your listening. The beauty of the practice of mindful listening is that we can notice when we enter our ego and come back to our breath, retune in and come back to the speaker. If this becomes too difficult, then no mindful communication is possible. How often are we thwarted by wanting meaningful conversations with people who go into their ego, blocking the communication before it truly starts? Reconciliation is not possible when the ego speaks through us. The world needs better communication. We all need to work together in our own lives, in our own relationships, to hold space for others. There are so many misperceptions, judgments, and violence in our everyday communications. By becoming a peaceful Zen communicator, by firstly attending to our own needs, and secondly putting aside our ego needs to really listen to someone, we can contribute to peace and understanding in the world. People with this skill would maintain better relationships and repair broken lines of communication, allowing reconciliation and harmony to occur more widely. Most relationships break down because of our lack to be mindful in our conversations. We're quick to beat ourselves up mentally and to be verbally defensive or attacking with others. We're thinking mostly of our own problems, not the needs of the other person. By showing up and being present for another person and helping them come to a solution for their needs, our own needs can often get met anyway. The Zen communicator approach is to be fully present, offer empathic responses, simply by reflecting back what the other has said, not judging anything and observing the facts. For example, someone might be complaining about their job. I really hate my job at the moment. It's so busy and my manager keeps giving me more work. The mindful listener can reflect this back. You're not liking your job. They're giving you more than you can handle. You're using your own words, so not as to repeat it back like a parrot. All you're doing is reflecting back what the other person has said. It's not offering a solution or telling them that they're wrong or that it's justified that they feel that way or anything. You might have a completely different opinion about something, but there's no need to say it. The person talking to you has a feeling and opinion about something, and that's what needs to be heard. Once this is understood, the person will begin to relax and calm enough to gain their own insights. The mantra for a Zen communicator is simply, how do I give to ease suffering? By holding the space, by being patient with warmth, compassion and loving kindness, you help the other person in some way. They leave the conversation in a better place than when they came in. Be very cautious about asking anything other than reflective questions. Help the person explore their needs with curiosity and gentleness, being fully attentive with your body language and presence, with little more than nodding and smiling as the other person speaks, and you'll ease a lot of suffering. Relationships have to be worked at with good communication. If we ignore our own feelings, it can lead to discord and ultimately break up between people we really love. So many of us don't like to show our vulnerability, those times when we haven't got things together. It's vital that we create a loving atmosphere in our own homes, or else how can we love out in the world? The practice of sitting together with a stone can help. If you have a willing friend or partner, it's a wonderful practice to sit together and work at communicating more deeply. Find a comfortable place in your home, create ceremony, have candles burning, sit on cushions on the floor like you're planning a meditation. Of course, you don't need to do any of this, but this can offer a sacred place for you to speak to one another with as much focus on compassion as possible. To begin, one of you takes a stone or another object of your choosing, and the other listens as the person with the stone speaks. While someone has the stone, the other person refrains from speaking and practices their mindful listening. When one person has finished talking, they pass the stone to the other, and then they become the mindful listener. Everyone gets a chance to speak, to reflect on what's going on without interruption. This is key to understanding where someone is at. While someone is speaking, we offer our mindful presence. We notice if our head takes over and enters our ego mind, if we begin to feel threatened by what the other is saying. It could be related to you after all. But we do our best in breathing with our emotions and truly listening. This is the first stage in healing a rift or tension. The ability and the desire from all parties involved to listen is truly a gift to each other. When the time comes to speak, we'll have hopefully listened as deeply and with as much presence as we could muster. The time spent listening will have aided in cultivating patience, understanding and compassion. Knowing that someone suffers, we gain more wisdom in what to say to ease their suffering and of any part we have played. Often through deep listening we realize we have wrong perceptions of what's happened or how the other person feels about it. Maybe the other person acted out through a completely different storyline in their own mind about the situation. By listening deeply we can work out the wrong perceptions, and with our speech the time may come to express our own version of the truth. Note that both truths may be correct from each individual perspective. It's important to be truthful. We can phrase the truth with as much loving kindness as we can manage. We're seeking to ease suffering, not create more. Our speech should be filled with compassion and gentleness. We're not in our ego. We are there for the other person, not to defend ourselves from their words. People only act out from their suffering. Any argument or harsh word comes from suffering. Anger or frustrations are suffering and are born out of not understanding the other person's need and our place in those needs. An example would be our partner wants to see more of us, but this has become impossible due to extra work hours. When we reconnect, often one person is tired from work and the other is frustrated because of the lack of quality conversation or time. This is where sitting with a stone can be invaluable. It offers time for reconnection, for mutual understanding. One person might be saying that it's imperative that I work to keep food on the table. The other saying, what's the point of that unless we can have quality time together? Different viewpoints such as these often come from the same need to have a loving, nourishing relationship. By sitting together, explaining in as loving speech as possible, reconciliation can occur. Instead of saying, I need to work, which isn't particularly loving, saying, I can understand that we need more quality time together, just as I understand the need to keep us surviving with money. What can we work on together to create a happy balance? This is more gentle and opens up discussion for the other person's needs. It's truly an art to practice mindful speech. We can use mindfulness and slow pauses so that we phrase things in a certain way. It's doubly important not to speak when we're filled with strong emotions like anger. We'll often say hurtful things in those situations. Everyone needs a space to breathe. Create a breathing space in your home. It can be part of a room or a whole room in itself. Make it a place of comfort, of ceremonial space. Whenever you have a strong emotion such as anger, you can visit your breathing space and sit with your emotions. You can breathe deeply, noticing your in-breath and your out-breath. By doing this, it is possible to calm your emotions. We stay with it for as long as is needed until the feeling subsides. We also look deeply at our emotion. Where has it come from? It might not be from the current situation or even the current people in your life. What might your unmet needs be? Is this something that you can communicate with loving speech when you're next sitting with your partner? If a conversation or mindful communication time becomes too difficult, there's nothing wrong with calling a halt and taking some moments in your breathing space to regain your composure and presence. I highly recommend it. Knowing that everyone suffers gives us compassion. Knowing that suffering is universal, that it often affects what we do, what we say, and how we act with people, can offer insight and wisdom into situations. With compassion comes understanding. We have all been there in the same predicament, countless times, fighting and arguing over this and that. What is truly important? That we stick to our ego thoughts about being safe for me, or that we decide to help and ease suffering in ourselves, in those we love, in everyone? By choosing to sit with people, to hold the space, to practice being a Zen communicator of peacefulness, we begin to change our relationships, our life, our world. If we heal other people's suffering, we also heal it in ourselves. People who don't want to communicate are living in their fear. They're closed off as a way of protecting themselves. It might only be for a certain time, or it might be a habit that keeps them safe. They might be suffering hugely, in strong depression or anxiety. It's worth remembering that we need patience. It can be incredibly difficult to help ease their suffering to begin with. We need to refrain from jumping in and trying to help people fix their problems. We need to be there for them with our presence, our spaciousness, and our compassion. After a time, even closed people will be able to relax in the presence of someone practicing deep listening and loving kindness. When they begin to open up, the healing and laying down of ego armor can begin. At times it can be too painful or too difficult to engage someone we love in face-to-face conversation, especially if they're closed off, or if we're stuck in our anger, hurt, or frustration about a situation. In these instances, it can be healing to write a letter. Even if you don't send the letter, you can write it for you. In fact, the bigger the issue at hand, the more that I suggest you don't send the letter. Use the process to release emotions and resentments for yourself until you reach the point where these things can be spoken, without consciously or unconsciously wishing to wound the other person. A transformation can occur in you. If you can let go of your own suffering by being with it, owning it, embracing it, you can then be there for the other. You'll be healed and nourished by your own mindful, compassionate words. By writing a note, you're showing that you want to understand, that you want to connect. You are open. This in itself can sometimes be enough to start the conversation again. When we close down, stay in our own mind and nurse our perceived wounds, that's when mindful communication is rarely possible. With the practice of mindful listening and mindful speaking, you'll notice so much more during conversations, and that knowledge will help guide you to a better understanding of people and of your own habits. It takes courage and patience to adopt mindfulness. To begin with, we're seeking to come out of our old patterns, our old ways of thinking. We're trying to undo what we've learned from our entire lifetime so far. That can be a daunting proposition. To realize that much of our suffering comes from our old conditioned thoughts, to truly look at and take appropriate responsibility for our state of being, can bring up a lot of emotions from the past. Sometimes these emotions we buried for a reason. They were too painful to bear, so we hid them away, distracted ourselves in work, in projects, in addictions, and in relationships. It is a wonderful act of self-compassion to you to be choosing to begin to walk this new path. It's not necessarily easy or difficult, but it is certainly challenging, and you'll face many inner demons on your way. I look at my own demons now as old facets of myself, nothing to fear, just parts of me that I need to sit with and talk with. They're guardians of the past. They hold on to it. They want to keep it as part of my identity so that I can learn from my past. No wonder that we find it easier to stay the same, to focus on pleasures of life, whilst keeping the difficult things hidden away. More than once in my own mindfulness practice, I've wanted to run. At those times I've wished I could go back to how it was before I ever heard of the word mindfulness, and I've even yearned to wallow in my old comfort zones. The compelling lure of those familiar patterns and subconscious habits offer the illusion of a protective bubble where I can stay safe and avoid any suffering. However, when I look deeply, I fully realize that I can no longer go back. I know that even if I tried, I would be unfulfilled and once again tortured with my old emotions and thoughts. I can't reclaim my old anger, loneliness, and life, even if I get the odd notion to do so. I realize that it wasn't a protective bubble after all. It was a prison, a place of feeling trapped in a world of uncertainty and insecurity. Mindfulness embraces the uncertainty of the future and the insecurity of the past. It takes patience, understanding, compassion and love to accept and follow its teachings. When I look back at my life and see where I now am, I bow humbly to the essence within that is my awareness. The fact that I can be the observer, the awareness of everything that comes to me, shows that I cannot be imprisoned by anything. I am something greater, connected to and fueled by the boundless energy of the universe. The more I embrace this viewpoint, the less fear keeps me held at bay. My comfort zone increases. I can now talk to groups in public. I can now hold meetings. I can now visit what I used to regard as strange, fearful places. In noticing as much as possible in my days, I can gain peacefulness and happiness from ordinary, wonderful and challenging days alike. This awareness has given me access to an enduring joyfulness which previously eluded me. I used to search for it, strive for it, through fear-based thinking, trying to force my life to be joyful and successful, rather than simply accepting where I was. You may find that when you first begin to practice mindfulness, that you think it's too hard. You'll find it difficult to find the time to practice, or you'll forget to do it altogether. You'll fall easily back into your old patterns of thinking and doing, causing you to lose belief in your ability to change it all. What I will say for you to remember in those moments of despair is that small amounts of practice, little and often, go a very long way. You don't need to rush this. You don't need to ensure that you keep to a schedule to meditate every day for the rest of your life. On the path to Zen mindfulness, we're gentle with ourselves. We take each day as it comes, and when we notice our ego, our discontent or our despair, we smile at it and we greet it with the wisdom of our awareness, of our non-thinking mind, our heart. If we let our heart guide us, if we let our mind take a back seat and use it only when we need to solve a problem in the moment, we can discover the truth of everything in our lives and smile in that knowing, even when it causes us to feel our suffering. So, gentle being, smile and go forth. Be the best human you can be. Notice what you can, breathe with what you can. The world will be great.